If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment cause chaos. Use ShipStation instead. From running a business out of your garage to multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating tasks. Plus, you'll get the best shipping rates from global carriers. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
All right, you hear the music. You know what that means, everybody. It is time for Ohio Political News. We are running. Yeah! Time for Ohio Political News. We're trying something a little bit new and unusual tonight. Joe Miller is not feeling well. He's under the weather. So the rest of the gang have all rallied around a couple of issues and topics we want to bring to you tonight. We're going to kick things and we are going to be covering something I think everybody needs to know about called the Delphi Method. I'm going to bring you up to speed on all things NOACA. If you don't know what that is, stay tuned. You need to know, especially if you're in Northeast Ohio. We're going to talk briefly about what metropolitan planning organizations are and how they work and what to watch out for them. Property taxes update from Brian Massey. We're going to bring you up to speed on Ohio medical freedom and House Bill 73, where things stand with that. There's a cool new commercial that's coming out this week. You might even find the technology to preview that for you. There's weird things happening at Lake County Community College, and there's a kind of a teaser that's been sent out by a prominent figure in our community suggesting that this Doge thing should come to all 88 counties in Ohio. So we're going to kick things around here a little bit. Why don't we go around the horn here? John Plechnik, let's go to you next. What's going on in Lake? Bring us up to speed.
Hello. So I have to think that your friend has been watching my Facebook feed because as I've been debating people about property taxes and they say, if you cut taxes, how can you possibly pay for it? You'll just have to raise taxes on someone else. My response is, no, we need to cut spending to pay for tax cuts. And I think the Department of Governmental Efficiency is a concept that shouldn't just be for all 88 counties. It should be for all 3,000 counties in the country and the many thousands of municipalities and local governments thereunder. There should be a Department of Government Efficiency, i.e. a non-paid committee of tough, intelligent business people guiding our elected officials everywhere. And I think that President Trump, Elon Musk, and Vivek Ramaswamy are giving us a very powerful template.
That's spectacular. So I will be following that closely. I'm one of those people that picked up on it and ran with it early on. But let's go over to Brian Massey. Brian, bring us up to speed on all things going on with property taxes and
let me before we start with the property taxes, let me play one of my favorite songs, if I may. Join in if you want to, okay? We may lose a couple liberals that are watching, but I'm sorry I got to do it.
Good. We got to get them off here. Yeah, hold that up to the microphone. Let's do a little Trump dance. Awesome.
All right. We'll get back to property taxes. Enough of this silliness here.
Brian, let me just interject really quickly because you brought that up and played that song. We actually had our county GOP meeting last night, our holiday party, and somebody and it looks like we froze there for a minute, but hopefully we're back. So somebody held up, and I learned something last night. They made the comment that one of the Village people, I think it was the guy that wrote the song and released a public statement flying directly in the face of all these leftist entertainers and said, hey, more power to him. If Trump wants to use that song, I think it fits him. He should go for it. So we actually now have the actual seal of approval, the blessing of at least one of the people from the Village people for Trump to use that. So have at it, everybody. I say play it everywhere and do that dance and offend the leftists.
All right, back to property taxes. I'll just, we can talk for hours on this, but let me just do it try and do it in a minute. Leonard and I are still on the mission of trying to reach out to our state politicians and to do something very meaningful for our citizens, not only the citizens of Lake County, but all of the citizens of Ohio. And we thank Commissioner Plechnik for stepping up at commissioner meetings and basically agreeing with us that something needs to be done, because we will start pricing the seniors and those on fixed incomes out of their homes. But it's become so egregious now that the younger generations are really going to feel the impact that they may not even be able to afford homes. One thing that we are going to do, I had a citizen ask me, Brian, you've got to do something. So I had the idea of creating a survey that we are going to send out probably the first or second week of January to as many Ohioans that want to fill it out. And we are going to give the results to the legislators to perhaps give them some indication of what the citizens in Ohio, what is the pressure? What are they actually feeling about the property taxes? And we chose first or second week in January. That's when the first tax bills are going to go out, and that's when the reality is going to hit many people. What we've been saying for over a year now is going to come home to roost, and they're going to see their property tax bill, or they're going to see an increase from their bank if they have the property taxes in the mortgage. We did go down a few weeks ago. Leonard and I did go down for a protest rally. You can see the video, online. For the first time in my life, I actually was speaking in a microphone or a megaphone really about protesting, and we did meet with a Representative Brian Stewart. He's in the Columbus area. I think it's District 12. He was very gracious and spent his time, and he's also going to be looking at how we can actually change the Ohio Revised Code to allow the Budget Commission to be a watchdog for the taxpayers. Unfortunately, what I've seen in Lake County and probably in some other counties too, there is no entity or no person that's actually doing any checks and balances on the taxing authorities, and they are just really taxing us out of our homes. So I'll turn it over to you, Jonathan. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Yeah, you bring up a very relevant and good point there. For anybody listening on social media, ask questions, chime in, send your questions in. We're going to get those up on the screen if possible and answer your questions about important topics like property taxes and the implications to not just our elderly, but what does this mean for future generations? We know that it's getting more and more difficult. And actually, some recent surveys of high school and college age kids indicates that there's diminishing hope that these kids are going to find a meaningful home to buy. I think that we're being pressured in the direction of becoming forever renters, and that's not a good thing. Property ownership is a tremendous value, and I think we should be fighting back, not just on behalf of our elderly, but for our future, for kids. So why don't while we're on the topic of property tax, let's go over to Leonard. Leonard, give us your insights and the latest on the property tax issue.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I know Brian had talked about doing immediate relief, and that's necessary, but we're still on our mission to inevitably work toward eliminating the property tax. Now, everybody freaks out when I say that, but there are mechanisms out there besides tying the taxes to our home. And what we're trying to do is just leave our homes out of it. The system is complicated. You're paying taxes on unrealized gains. And if you look at what we're getting for our money, it just doesn't make sense. And so the whole idea of liberty, transferring generational wealth and things like that, they become meaningless as long as you're still a renter from the government. So I do know that they didn't pass the amendment in North Dakota, but I was encouraged because, again, they didn't have a lot of money, but it was a citizens-led initiative to amend the Constitution. And to my surprise, it made it to the ballot. Now, it lost, okay. I think it was 35%. But the interesting thing is that tells me it can be done. And the key thing in this whole process, from my understanding, is, at least from the reports from Michigan, the toughest hurdle is education, because people just don't even understand what the word freedom or liberty means anymore. And not to mention the fact that government has grown to such an extent that it's bigger than the role of the family and the role of the church. And when that happens is now you don't have a clear mechanism for thinking your way out of the box. And so it's going to be it's a lot of work. I don't know what will happen during my lifespan or my time interval, but for me, the thing is to be obedient to what God has called us to do. And more importantly, we leave something for the next generation, because if not, they won't stand the snowball's chance in hell of getting through this if they don't have any idea of what they should be fighting for. So I'm moving forward, and I'm sure that we're going to run into some roadblocks. But I can tell you right now, every time Brian and I go out, we pick up another a supporter in the different counties. And so we're growing, but it doesn't take a majority. What it takes is a significant minority to influence the majority. And that's where we are.
Leonard, why don't you mention about you're going to be speaking in front of the Patriots in Geauga County. Why don't you tell us about that?
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Brian. Not just to mention that also, but we also have a speaking engagement down in Newark, Ohio, to another group that I'm not even familiar with. We just found out about that. But as far as the speaking in Geauga County, I'm going to let people know the reality of the property tax and what exactly does it mean when I say that we are renters as opposed to owners. There's a big difference between renting and owning something. And so I'll be speaking there at their meeting in February. And also that the meeting down in Newark, Brian, I think that's early January or middle of January. So we're picking up steam. The word's getting out, and I'm pretty encouraged by what we're seeing. And I'm also continuing to reach out to a lot of the legislators. I was very happy to get in touch with Brian Stewart. It was a breath of fresh air because he was one of the very few guys that I've heard, with the exception of John Plesnick, to actually talk about what do we need to cut. And when I hear people talking about this Doge, what makes me nervous is that, especially in the Republican camp, what I see is promoting what I call efficient socialism, as opposed to actually cutting something that's unconstitutional. So that's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds as we go through his 100-day period with Donald Trump. I'm curious to see how this unfolds.
So yeah, Jonathan, we will be live streaming the Geauga and also down in the other. I forgot the location already, Leonard. Where we're going to be. Newark, yeah, down in Newark. We will be live streaming that for Ohio Political News, so our listeners will be able to watch that also.
So I'd like to follow up of Leonard and Brian with a few thoughts, because I think it's so important that we take action now, but we also have a plan for the longer term. And I know this is going to seem like a little bit of an aside, but bear with me, because I think there are real parallels to, frankly, a mission as big as reforming government spending and the tax system, and movements like the anti-slavery campaign in Great Britain and the United States. You know, the founding fathers, contrary to what many historical revisionists would say, understood that slavery was a problem, but they also knew that if they tried to tackle it all at once, they'd never be able to bring the Union together. There were just too many folks who disagreed with them absolutely to win in one step. And so the founding fathers tried to, over time, take us in that direction. And ultimately was the founder of the Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln, who abolished slavery in the United States. And in Great Britain, not many people in the United States have heard the name William Wilberforce, but this man was elected to Parliament as an independent, no party infrastructure at the age of 21. And he spent decades incrementally fighting against slavery, starting by attacking the slave trade and trying to stop new enslavement. And ultimately, at the end of his life, he finally succeeded. His movement finally did abolish slavery in the British Empire. And I think that these examples teach us something, which is that Christians have to have the humility that we can't wave a magic wand and change the world instantaneously. We have to have patience. We have to understand that we may or may not be Joshua, the man who blows the horn, knocks down the walls, and takes us to the promised land. Most of us are Moses. Most of us have to wander in the wilderness following God's will, but we are making progress. And so taking us to the present day, I want to have a world where we are not taxing people's homes at all. I want to have a world where the government is as small and efficient as it can be, not efficient socialism, as Leonard says, but really focused on the main tasks of government, which is safety, military, roads, infrastructure that the private sector can't provide, and not these million and one other nonsenses that we've tacked on since then. But one very modest first step that with the control the Republican Party has in Ohio is that we can attack this issue of unrealized gains in this sextennial revaluation. The state legislature tomorrow, without any constitutional amendments, without any sea changes, could change that valuation procedure and eliminate unrealized gains. Bing, bang, boom. I think ideally we should have a freeze in between sales where property values don't fluctuate at all until you sell your property. But if that's not doable politically, we have examples from Florida and other states where we cap the increase. In Florida, there's a limit of 3% per year. 0% is better than 3%, but given the 30% value increases we're seeing in Lake County and across the state, 3% would be a blessing about now. So I think we, with humility, need to tackle the problem of the revaluation and inflation right now with the long-term plan to keep going and keep going and keep going. And I'd add one other thing to my immediacy plan, which is we have to look at the folks who are most negatively impacted by these inflationary unrealized gains by just packing the value up on everyone's property. And those are folks on a fixed income. That's principally seniors, but it's also disabled veterans and others. And we need to look to seniors first and everyone on a fixed income and give them special relief. And that's why I've personally proposed 100% property tax exemption for seniors. I've said it in the Columbus Dispatch. I've said it at the DS at Lake County Commissioners meetings. And I've also proposed a resolution where we would actually send a statement from the people of Lake County to the state legislature saying we need to stop taxing unrealized gains for everyone. And for seniors in particular, we need to have 100% exemption on their home from property taxes. And I think that is a noble first step. But I agree with Leonard, we can't stop there, because this attitude that the government owns everything, we're paying rent, and if they give us a few pennies back on the dollar we pay them, we're lucky. We've got to abandon the socialist attitude. We have to understand we own everything because God gave it to us, and we're just giving the government a little bit to do its job. If it doesn't do its job well, we should change providers. There's Coke, there's Pepsi, there's one government, there's another, and we've hired a hell of a new president. Donald Trump is going to get the job done, but only if we help him.
Yeah, John, I agree, Commissioner Plechnik. One other thing that I would say that, number one, they've got to eliminate some of the complexity. When I find out that some of the legislators don't even understand the property taxes, that's a problem. But also the House Bill 920 and the 20 mil floor, this idea that they can treat outside millage like inside millage, I think is really contrary to the Ohio Constitution when they can write into laws that they can do anything that they want, and they have done that with House Bill 920 and 20 mil floor. And that's what's causing a problem. but I recognize that the teachers unions are going to push very hard against that, because with 50% of the 600 school districts at the 20 mil floor, as the property values increase, they're going to see substantial increases in their revenue without a vote of the taxpayers, and I find that reprehensible.
And Brian, I don't think that's by accident. I think this complexity is by design. Putting on my tax professor hat, I think that intentionally the property tax system in Ohio has been made to be complex and opaque, so that the average taxpayer doesn't understand who's raising their taxes and who's responsible. And I always try to simplify it as best I can. Just give folks the bare minimum information they need to make decisions when they vote, which is the school board controls your tax rate, about 60% of it to be precise. But, simplest terms, school board controls the tax rate. The state legislature controls the tax base, which is our property value. If you think your rate's too high, you need to go to the school board meeting and pound the table. If you think the property valuation is too high, it's the state legislators. And I'll tell you, it's scary how many people come to you and say, I think it's the county auditor. I think it's my councilman. I think it's the dog catcher. I don't think that confusion is an accident. I think that not all, but some state reps and senators in Columbus, not all, but some special interests, and maybe some school districts are included in this, want you to be in the dark. They don't want you to understand that it is very possible to reform property taxes. We could do it this December. This does not require a constitutional amendment. It requires a vote from the so-called conservative supermajority in Columbus, who say they want to cut taxes every time they suck in a breath. Well, here you go. This would be an opportunity to be a conservative superhero. Why don't we see action now?
100%, John. And the other thing is that the school boards will not tell the taxpayers how much they're going to receive from the 20 mil floor and what is the impact to the taxpayers. And the reason they don't do that is they do not want information going out to the average citizens, because they do not want the
ask your questions. Let's get information out there so that we, the people, the public of Ohio, Ohioans actually understand these things and the implications of them, because they hit you in the pocketbook. Yes, they sound complex. What in the heck is an inside millage versus outside? And what does that actually mean? At the end of the day, we want to be able to put that into meaningful terms that you can understand and know how it's impacting you and the taxes you pay and where those taxes go, for heaven's sake. That all goes toward accountability. So connected to that, I want to encourage everybody to like and follow and share. So whatever platform you're on watching this video, make sure to click that like button. Pause right now, go down there, click that like button, share with friends, and get this information out. Also, I want to ask Brian Massey to give the website. So information about the things that you're working on, is it lobbyistforcitizens.org? I think we're glitching a little bit here. It seemed to have frozen. But I was asking Brian Massey if you could give us your website. I don't know if that's on my end.
The website is lobbyist plural for FOR citizens.com. Lobbyistforcitizens.com.
I thought it was .org. Thank you for that. So go to lobbyistforcitizens.com. Flag that. There it is. You can see it in the background. Lobbyistforcitizens.com. Go to that website. You can follow the work that Leonard and Brian are doing on fighting for we, the people of Ohio, on this property tax issue. And don't forget, you can search this stuff too. If any of us bring up terms and you're just not in a place where you can add it to the comments and ask a question, then just do some searches. I think you'll find a lot of information. And a lot of this stuff is consistently threaded throughout a series of different episodes. So if you hear us bring up something like inside millage, chances are pretty good it's going to come up consistently in future podcasts. So I want to actually jump over now. Well, actually, I'm going to pause to my intended next topic. And was it Kent? Somebody had a comment that popped up there briefly. It flashed quickly enough I wasn't able to read it. If that comes back up again, it would
Yeah,
try and.
we're just promoting OhioPoliticalNews.com, and I think we're doing a good job of letting people know to go to social media. But just make sure to check out, check out OhioPoliticalNews.com/shop, and you can get a mug. There's some shirts. We're talking about property taxes. We got the property guys gear up there. We're gonna try to get more gear up there throughout the upcoming weeks and next year. So make sure to check. Sharing is caring. So make sure you share this video and share wherever you're watching. We're on Facebook, X, Rumble. Make sure to, if you can, give us a Rumble rant, and that would be appreciated too by just clicking the $ at the bottom. It does cost money to do this, and we appreciate you guys all watching. And thanks, Jonathan, and I'll let you get back to the show.
Awesome. Yeah, this mug is spectacular. I mean, not just because it has my image on it, so I can hold it this way and show off my own image. That's my social media profile I use. But it makes all your drinks taste better. It's more delicious. And an Ohio Political News mug. So there's our shameless plug for the OPN swag. But I want to jump over to another sort of a complex subject that has a lot of moving parts to it, but it's really important that everybody know about this. There is, and I'm not going to remember the dates exactly, so I'm just going to sort of paraphrase. I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. Several decades ago, laws were passed that require any major metropolitan area with a citizen with a number of people living in a region above a certain threshold. They must have something called a metropolitan planning organization. They exist all throughout the country. I believe there are 17 of them in Ohio. And anywhere you see sort of a congestion of population, they're required to have a metropolitan planning organization. Well, of course, in Northeast Ohio, based out of Cleveland, there's one called NOACA. That stands for Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency. That's a complex one. So these MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, they can range from pretty boilerplate, plain and simple. They help to sort of set a regional plan, and sometimes they span several different counties. And originally, again, this is kind of the Cliff's Notes version, they started off really just roads and bridges. And it was a simple mandate to make sure that if you're building some sort of freeway system that goes through an area like Cleveland, that it coordinates with neighboring counties, and it really made a lot of sense. And I think for some years it was probably pretty understandable and successful. Well, over the decades, that thing, and talk about Doge and the need for it, this thing in Cleveland, it's not the only one, but it's one that is definitely on the radar of people like me in Ohio, because it has grown and metastasized 1,000-fold. And it is so far outside of the original mandate of roads and bridges, it's breathtaking to look at what it's doing. So I'm just going to tease out a little bit of what's happening and hopefully bring more people's attention to this MPO and what they're doing. My view and the way that I suggest looking at this and the lens through which I view this MPO is Green New Deal. We saw the Green New Deal surface with AOC in Washington, D.C., and it was going to be greeny, meany, bad stuff throughout. It was like environmental change and social justice. And we all remember that. And America balked. We did not want the Green New Deal. Across the board, it was very unpopular. So you notice that it disappeared, sort of. It, in my book, has absolutely resurfaced in the form of what are called climate action plans. I'm air quoting that. These climate action plans, and of course, Cleveland-based NOACA has theirs. This climate action plan is a recipe to usurp and take over and effectively eliminate many iterations, many sort of elements of representative government. It takes away from we the people our voice and our vote. So here's the way this is manifesting, and this is what I want to get to. I've learned something, and I think it's fundamentally important that everybody know this. I learned something only just a few days ago called the Delphi Method. Look it up. There's some videos. I've shared a video actually just a few hours before this show started tonight with my colleagues on the show. And here's what this looks like. You have these organizations, and there are many of them. They're actually, some of the videos surround the San Francisco Bay Area, and we all know what's happened there. Their voice of the people in San Francisco has been usurped and silenced. The way that ends up happening and the way that that sort of process is conducted is orchestrated. That's the only word I can think of that really fits it. And that, I'm going to finish my comments on that, ask for comments and feedback from my colleagues here. And of course, if you're hearing this and you have questions or comments, please do add your comments to the platform wherever you're viewing this. But this is what this looks like. You get a planning organization that is far removed from the public. And I'll tell you personally, I have great difficulty getting access to anybody in any meaningful way at this organization. It's a huge sort of a bureaucratic cabal of people, and they are presenting all kinds of massive sweeping changes under this climate action plan that affect virtually everything about our lives. Roads, bridges, air, water, transportation, agriculture, you name it, it's on there. And it stands to give a massive amount of power to a small bureaucratic group that we can't connect with. Well, here's where this Delphi method comes in, and it's actually evil genius when you realize what it is. What this group is doing is going out into the public under the guise of seeking community guidance and feedback on the steps and initiatives that they're taking. However, there is ultimately no actual mechanism for anybody to provide input. I know that sounds strange. When you watch the video, it'll make a lot more sense. But I went to yet another meeting this past Wednesday where there's a person there, really nice person. He's a great gentleman, very friendly, big smile, and he presented all this information. We're going to change this about air and water and transportation and roads, and we must reduce carbon footprint and carbon neutral and does all this stuff. And as they're saying, we're here to provide an engagement with community. There's a questionnaire that effectively boils down to how much do you like us? A lot or a really lot? And there's no checkbox for none of the above. And there's no opportunity to go back to that organization ever under any circumstances that I'm able to find after years of looking to say, no, we don't want this. Go away. Go back to roads and bridges. Don't try and take over our agriculture and farming in Geauga and all the other terrible things that you want to do. So I'm not able to, or I don't yet know how to add a link in this stream. If I figure out how to, I will. But if you go to YouTube and look up Delphi Method, you're going to find a couple of videos on that. So turning things over, we'll start with Brian. Have you heard of the Delphi Method, Brian, and know anything about this?
Yeah, Jonathan, I had heard of it, but I appreciate the video that you sent to me, and I did take a look at briefly, and it is very devious the way they go out into the public, and with all the supposedly or allegedly good intentions and trying to get feedback from the citizens in the community, but they're not really doing that at all. They're just they're telling you what they are going to do. But I think we do have a guest here, and Commissioner Plechnik. I'm sure he is very knowledgeable on this and also in NOACA because he is one of the representatives in Lake County. on the NOACA board. I've been down to NOACA, a couple times, and I just see that I don't see what Lake County has, why we're even with the city of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County. They're two different entities, but what they're trying to do is they really are trying to change our way of life. I think you've probably seen that in Geauga County, and I certainly have seen that in Lake County. They want to get us out of the cars and onto the public transportation, and they'd love to have us, out of our homes and into apartments, which would be similar to the way of life in European cities. That's the goal, I think. But maybe Commissioner Pletcher can jump in.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to step on your toes. Just a note of clarification, then I want to go over to Commissioner Plechnik for any feedback. This climate action plan and what NOACA is proposing, again, that stands for Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency. There are several throughout the state. In my view, this what represents the most egregious, I think is the word that I'm looking for. But what it stands to impact is a 5-county-wide area. That's Geauga, Lake, Lorain, Medina, and Cuyahoga County. If you're in Southern Ohio or listening to this elsewhere, that is Cleveland and its county. It's in Cuyahoga County and the surrounding 4. So I just wanted to give that clarification geographically. Commissioner Plechnik, any feedback on NOACA?
So first of all, I'd like to give people a little more background so that we understand what we're dealing with in terms of a metropolitan planning organization. In real terms and most important terms, it's essentially a pass-through for federal gas tax dollars and grants, which were obviously initially earmarked exclusively for roads and bridges, the infrastructure that we need to actually burn gas and travel from point A to point B. And there was a certain logic to allocating gas tax to invest in roads and bridges, because the folks who are using the roads and bridges are in effect paying for them. And while it was collected federally, it was divvied up at the local level to get the job done. So as Jonathan said, I think the initial vision of MPOs was very bland, uninteresting, and arguably a useful tool to maintain road infrastructure. But like all government, it tends to grow. It's kind of like a black hole. It just keeps eating more and more, getting more and more massive. And the bigger government gets, the bigger it wants to get. So leaving behind the original mission of maintaining roads and bridges, which is something I think most of us agree with, we see this Green New Deal agenda. And while NOACA and MPOs generally don't have an enormous amount of power to implement the Green New Deal, it is amazing to see how they've used the very small jurisdiction and justifications that they do have to send out survey after survey, to do workshop after workshop with taxpayer dollars, asking the same questions over and over again. And I agree with Jonathan. These events are certainly set up with a conclusion in mind. They want to convince you that climate change is real, that carbon dioxide is the principal cause of climate change, and that this carbon dioxide increase is man-made. Notice I didn't say human-made or woman-made, because if it's bad, it's definitely men. It's man-made. That's okay to say these days. But in all seriousness, NOACA, like all forms of government, has grown. Now, why am I a member of NOACA? It's not because I'm excited about NOACA and the Green New Deal. It's because Lake County's charter agreement with NOACA provides that its 3 county commissioners, its county engineer, and the head of its transit service, that would be Lake Tran, all are automatically board members. So if you're elected a county commissioner in Lake, you're automatically on the board. And so I've had a front row seat to the good that NOACA has done in terms of taking money and reinvesting it in roads and bridges. And as a Lake County commissioner, that's where my sole interest lies. But I've also seen them continuously push this Green New Deal attitude. And I've gone to the same workshops, I've seen the surveys, and I voted against spending more money on them. But needless to say, I was dramatically outvoted. Now, I do want to pause for just a second, because even if we're outnumbered, it's still important that we're well represented. And I want to make a small announcement. Many of your listeners will know this name. He's been a guest on our show many times. Mayor John Mara, mayor of Timberlake Village in Lake County, Ohio. I'm proud to announce here for the first time that I have named John my official alternate on NOACA. So when I don't attend the meetings, Mayor John Mara will be sitting there in my place. The appointment has been made. So I think that you have a strong conservative voice in John there. But are we outnumbered? Yes, we are.
That's a really good choice in John Mara. So, Commissioner Plechnik, I think it was Medina that fairly recently several commissioners from the county of Medina issued a public statement really effectively rebuking a lot of what NOACA is doing. Do you recall that, and can you comment on that?
Yes, Medina has sent out several rebukes to NOACA in the last couple of years, and I generally agree with them. At the same time, much of this goes back to the idea of, can Geauga, can Lake, can Medina secede from NOACA? And there are two fundamental problems with that approach. Problem number one, it doesn't mean you're out of an MPO. You have to be in an MPO regardless of whether you're in NOACA. You could have an MPO just for your county, or with 2 counties or 3 counties or 5 counties like NOACA, but ultimately you're stuck having an MPO. So you can't simply opt out and say, we're not going to participate. Number two, seceding from NOACA, it's a little bit like a lobster trap. You can get in, you can't get out. Because to exit NOACA as a county, you actually have to have 2 things. Number one, you need to have the governor's permission. That's Mike DeWine at the moment. And number 2, people debate the second requirement, but given my best understanding, and I understand there are many folks who take differing interpretations, you need permission from, I believe, the board of NOACA. Now, some people say every elected official in the NOACA region has a vote, and some people say only the county commissioners in the seceding county have a vote. But I think the most likely interpretation is that the board of NOACA would have to vote. So following my logic, and I fully admit that people take differing interpretations, you need to get the governor's permission to leave, and you need a majority vote of the NOACA board. And a majority of the NOACA board is Cuyahoga County. And I can tell you right now, you are never going to get the governor and a majority of the NOACA board to let Medina, Lake, Geauga leave the MPO and form their own. Now, maybe things will change and new elected officials and governors will come, and it may become a meaningful conversation at that point. But right here and now, the odds of getting Governor DeWine and a majority of the NOACA board to let anyone leave, not very high. And so I think we're called to fight the fight in NOACA as opposed to try to secede from it, because one is possible, the other, at least today, at least as I see it, is not.
You bring up some good points, and that is, how do we respond to this whole thing? So I've heard the arguments both for and against. I happen to fall into the opposite camp. I have looked at it pretty closely, and I believe that it is possible to leave NOACA. And again, we're talking about those counties that surround Cuyahoga County. We're talking about the possibility of them just getting away, just leave Cleveland to its own devices. It can come up with its own Green New Deal stuff all by themselves, potentially. So that's what Commissioner Plechnik is bringing up, is that notion. It's being kicked about pretty seriously by some very prominent people, and it remains to be seen. So there are people arguing both sides whether or not it's possible. But that's where we, the people, come in, because the more, and it's like all of these things with big, bloated, overblown government with massive hidden budgets and opaque things that they do, the more shadow there is, the more they're able to get away with it and do bad things that we don't like and spend our money in really bad ways. So I bring it up. I bring it up so that you can be aware. Even if you're not in those 5 counties, you may want to tune in and see what's happening in this fight against NOACA, what they're trying to do. And yes, to be fair to the decades-long history of NOACA, they have done some meaningful things. So I don't want to diminish that. They have some worthwhile elements, but in my book, they're probably about 4,000% bloated and can use some massive scaling back. That's not going to happen until enough people are paying attention. And also, look at where you live. I believe it's so you've got Canton, Akron, you've got Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, of course. They also have MPOs. If you're listening from those regions, take a look at what they're doing. I don't think that you're going to find the level of sophisticated spending. I just try to be nice and put it that way. Yeah, I don't think you're going to find that in those regions. We have it probably, arguably, the worst in this region. But it is a battle that we need to be paying attention to, just like all the other ones. So you hear me on here periodically bringing up the fights for education in K through 12 and advocating for robust security measures on our election systems. And we're blessed to have Marcel Sturbich and many folks like him come on here. We bring these issues up to keep you aware, to bring you up to speed on our best understanding of these dynamics and these circumstances, these agencies that take our tax money and how they're spending them. Commissioner Plechnik, thank you for, let me finish this and then we'll go back over to you. Thank you for your awareness, that vote, the smart tapping of John Mara to act as substitute. I think that's a brilliant choice on your part and all that you're doing to help expose this. Back to you.
Well, Jonathan, that's part of the point, though. We need to have more conservative representatives because it's very easy to say Lake County is Republican, Geauga County is Republican, Lorain, Medina are Republican versus Cuyahoga and Cleveland that are predominantly Democrat. But what a lot of people don't understand about NOACA, and it took me a while to drill down into their procedures, is that it operates a lot like Congress in the sense that it almost has a bicameral legislature. You have the general board, of which I am a member, but you also have the executive board that only has 6 votes. And of those 6 votes, 1 goes to Cleveland, and the remaining 5 go to each of the 5 counties, Cuyahoga, Geauga, Lake, Lorain, Medina. And unfortunately, it may trouble you to understand this, nothing goes through NOACA without approval by both boards, the executive and the general board. So given that you need a majority vote of the general and executive board, and the Republican counties control 4 of the 6 votes, what does that tell you? That at least 2 Republicans have crossed sides to vote for the Green New Deal, to vote for the climate action planning and the surveys that have been done, to vote for all of the liberal workshops where they tell you, do you really like the Green New Deal or would you marry it if it were a person? Those questions are paid for with your tax dollars, and they're not just approved by the general board, which Cuyahoga does have a majority vote on. They're also approved by the executive board. Tomorrow, if we held our Republican representatives from all of our counties responsible, we could veto everything at the executive board level, and none of this would even go to a general board vote. But for some reason, Republicans vote a lot like Democrats, and I hope things will improve one on NOACA. And he voted like one in 2023 for the biggest sales tax increase in Lake County history. And it's no secret that he and I are not best of friends. I'm not saying this to be cruel, but actions speak louder than words. And at the end of the day,
Commissioner Plechnik, can I jump in here?
Is your vote. So we need to hold our representatives on NOACA accountable because we could be stopping this nonsense today.
If I may just, jump in there, we appreciate your opinion on that, but I'm not sure I would agree with you that Commissioner Hammercheck is a Democrat. But moving on, I do have a legitimate question. How does NOACA grow? If they started out with roads and bridges, is it the federal government who's giving them money, or is it the state that's giving them money that says you must now think about, the 15-minute cities and not just road and bridges, but you're going to talk about climate change and you're going to do something about that. I can't believe it's just the NOACA itself, its board, that's coming up with these changes. They've got to be getting the marching orders from either federal or state.
So, Brian, it's certainly true that the federal government under President Biden and Vice President Harris has been pushing MPOs and all local governments, for that matter, to the left. And when you provide grants for electric car charging stations, we know you're pushing the agenda to the left. I would prefer to see more funding for our VA hospital in Cleveland. I'd like to see more tax cuts. But instead, the priority was electric cars, Green New Deal, yada, yada. So, yes, the federal government has pushed everyone in that direction. But it's our job as conservative local officials to say no.
Yeah, when the money comes from the federal or state, the MPO, NOACA, they take their cut of it. Is it a 5, 10, 15%? And of the money that they get is it goes into their coffers to make sure that they can survive. So the problem that I have is that we keep growing the government, and less of that money for the gas tax is going into road and bridges.
Brian, the answer is it depends. It depends on the type of grant or government program NOACA is being funded by, but generally governments are allowed to spend a certain percentage of a grant for, say, roads on the planning for the road. So you can spend some of it on the architecture. You can spend some of it on mapping out and the zoning. And obviously NOACA takes that percentage and spends it on its staff, which do that work. Now, do I think NOACA takes a higher percentage than should be necessary for that work, particularly given that we have multiple layers of planners, not just NOACA, but we have county engineers, we have local city zoning departments. We've got so many bureaucrats who all have overlapping responsibilities that I hear you, Brian. I think there's a lot of waste at the planning stage. You really don't need to have a planner at the local, county, and then regional level, everybody checking over each other's paperwork. It could be done a lot more efficiently.
So that would be a real item that we could, if we had a local DOGE, like they're having at the federal government, that would be one area that we could really address.
Absolutely. Overlap of governments is a big problem, and no one wants to give up their jurisdiction.
Well, nobody wants to give up their gravy train government roles and their the attached salaries and wages. But I want to interject a couple of comments. One is Commissioner Pleshnik, you represent you gave me a good opportunity to reference once again Ohio rhino hunters. So those Republicans, those quasi-Republicans throughout the Republican Party, and I'm not personally close enough to former Commissioner Hamercheck, or is he out yet? No, he's Commissioner Hamercheck, to make that assertion. But I do know for a fact that there are a lot of people throughout the Republican Party in Ohio who really shouldn't be there. There's some combination of trans-Democrat, rhino, or feckless in some other way. So Ohio rhino hunters is all over social media. I am still working on trying to grow that messaging, but that's how we find these people and get daylight on them. But getting back to sort of brass tacks, and that I want to wrap up NOACA so we can also cover Lakeland, House Bill 73. We need to talk briefly, at least, about House Bill 73 and Ohio medical freedom. But the last point that I want to make on and I hope this is crystal clear on NOACA and everything like it, their mandate decades ago was roads and bridges. But look at the quality of our roads and bridges. It's like anything else. The more you try and spread something, the thinner it gets. I used to do a lot of scuba diving, and it was called task loading. If you try to overwhelm yourself with all kinds of new tasks, and by the way, using the school reference, which I use often, when you overload teachers with too much stuff, they can't do their core mission well. And I absolutely assert that that's where we are with NOACA. Drive around Cleveland and surrounding communities and surrounding counties, and you're going to, some places you drive through, you're going to need dental work after you drive through some of these potholes. The roads and bridges are in terrible shape. So as NOACA is spending all this money on these fluffy, flouncy looking surveys that go nowhere, and you're not allowed to answer anything other than yes, how high, our roads and bridges are dilapidated and have been neglected for decades. So I just wanted to interject that for perspective. At a certain point on all these things, we need to be bringing our government back to the things that they're supposed to be doing. And that includes, if we're stuck with these non-governmental organizational bureaucratic nightmare things, finding ways to make them do it too. But I want to touch on House Bill 73. So that's the Ohio Medical Freedom Act. If you haven't already, go find Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom. They go by OAMF for short. Stephanie Stock, who is heading that at the Ohio level, she's been a guest on this program before. Follow Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom in this House Bill 73. This is a bill in Ohio that has tremendous support across both sides of the aisle. It passed, I want to say, I think it was 73 votes. It passed the House and went to the Senate. This is a bill that gives the right and autonomy to your doctors in the event of a pandemic. Let's air quote that again, pandemic, the next big fear medical scare, for your doctor to do what they believe is right. Remember all those doctors who were forced not to use ivermectin or quercetin, hydroxychloroquine, all those kinds of things. They were told not to talk about zinc. That is awful. That was actually dictated top down from DeWine's office, and we can't let that happen again. There's a great bill that is waiting to pass and be signed. The word I'm getting is that it has the votes. It's stuck in the Senate right now. Here's what it did. It passed through the House with flying colors. It went into the Senate. The belief is that if it gets to a vote, if it is given the opportunity to go for a vote onto the floor, that's the term, if you're not familiar with that, it's being allowed to go to the floor for a vote just simply means that it comes out of committee and gets voted on. If it's voted on, I'm told that the thing will pass, and then it will go to Governor DeWine's desk for a signature, and I don't think that he has the spine to stand up against the glare of the Ohio citizenry and not sign that thing. But it's stuck with two people. I'm told that it boils down to two cousins involved in our Senate. That is Steve Huffman and his cousin Matt Huffman. The Huffman cousins, and this is all my understanding. I'm giving you my Cliff's Notes understanding of where we stand. Right now, both are in the Senate, and I'm told that both have significant funding politically from Ohio's hospital networks. So there you're connecting the dots. You know me, if you follow me at all on social media, I'm the follow the money guy. I want to know who's getting paid, who's paying whom for what, and what sort of captivity we have from our politicians. I can't document those relationships personally, but there are people like Stephanie Stock who are telling us, they're informing us that that is the conflict. So if these two people are indeed conflicted out, if they're conflicted on their choice and ability, the willingness to let this darn thing go to the floor in the Senate to get voted on, we need to turn up the pressure tremendously on both Huffmans, because that's unacceptable. We don't put representatives in Columbus so that they can make decisions on behalf of hospital networks and not we the people. We went through COVID. We don't want another COVID. We don't want people dying in hospital systems and elderly shoved into these assisted living facilities. The whole thing was a nightmare of death and doom. We cannot afford to let it happen again. And it's my understanding there are a total of two people in Ohio right now that are hamstringing this thing, and they've got it stuck. There's all kinds of stuff. Follow Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom. You're going to find great information, phone numbers, email. Remember, polite but assertive. If you are like me, you're going to make those phone calls, contact the Huffmans, send emails. You can certainly pound the table a little bit, be assertive. Please don't threaten. It just makes our side look bad. Don't send nasty emails, but please do turn up the heat and pressure on these guys. Anybody would like to comment on that?
Jonathan, all I'd like to say is that I 100% support this bill. I think that Donald Trump really opened a lot of people's eyes with Right to Try and how important it is to give folks control over their own medical destinies. And COVID was a real eye-opener for people of just how, not even socialist, how communist our medical system has become. I think it's very important that this bill pass. And while it may or may not get through this year, I know that folks like Siobhan and Lake County have been fighting for this type of reform for many years, and the fight may have to go on longer. I don't know who in Columbus is responsible for holding this up, but I support the bill, and I'm hopeful that with enough pressure, we can finally get Columbus to start listening to us. They really have no excuse. It's not like the Democrats can stop anything. You know, if it's not going through, it's Rhino stopping it.
Bingo. Brian, any comments? Leonard?
Well, I agree with both Jonathan and Commissioner Plechnik. It just has given me such a bad taste in my mouth about the whole medical community. I used to hold the medical community up in the highest pedestal. I used to think that do no harm. That was really a cornerstone of our medical community. But I've been jaded now because of this, and it obviously ivermectin, hydrochloroquine was not allowed to be used because the pharmacies or the big pharma, I guess we call them, they weren't making enough money. And I find that reprehensible. If the medical community is not looking out for the average citizens and who really is, have we become so jaded that we'll throw grandma, under the bus just to make a few more bucks? It's really a shameful process.
It's just awful. Leonard, it occurs to me that we talked NOACA, and we didn't cut over for your feedback. Any feedback on either NOACA or this medical freedom bill?
Well, NOACA, as far as I'm concerned, is just another pseudo level of government that's unnecessary, but that's a whole nother discussion because you're talking about what is the purpose of government. But anyway, on the medical freedom bill, the thing that bothers me is that why do we even need a bill for this? This is what's confusing to me, because when I look at, I'm presupposing our Constitution has some sort of rigor somewhere in the process. But if we're supposed to be promoting life, liberty, and by the way, the protection of property, which we're not doing that, then I don't understand why we have to go through a bill when, like I said, I was making my own decisions as far as getting ivermectin or whatever that I needed to get without permission of the hospital. I just did it, or any doctors. Now, doctors said, well, I don't know much about it, but that didn't stop me from getting it. So I'm not sure, what happened with all the details on that. So to me, freedom, as far as medical freedom, that just to me is just fundamental. So I don't even know why we need a bill for that. Again, maybe it's our Constitution has no rigor to it. And other than that, when I look at the whole notion, again, going back to what Pleasant was saying, what is the role of government? I'm not so sure we even know what the role of government is. And that includes the Republicans as well as the Democrats. So it's not a Republican-Democrat issue. This is just an education issue. And it's an indication of the type of people as a citizenry where we are as a nation.
Excellent comments. Thank you. And actually, so just to put things in perspective, you asked great questions about the need even. Why are we at a place where there is a need for House Bill 73, the Ohio Medical Freedom Act? That bill is important for a number of different reasons, not least of which is the ramifications to doctors who were advocating for anything other than this protocol that was dictated by hospital networks. So these hospital systems were telling everybody you had to put them on the ventilator, you had to give them remdesivir, which has a horrendous medical track record, and anything else. The doctors, actually, there were doctors who had their licenses and their ability to practice in medicine threatened, and some of them actually had their licenses not only threatened but removed. We need to clear that fog, and we need to send the the crystal clear message to Ohio's and actually all hospital systems that the patient comes first, not the interests of the pharmaceutical company and not political ambition. What happened in 2020 with COVID can't ever happen again. We need to send that message, and the Ohio this House Bill 73 does just that. With our remaining minutes, I want to turn things over to Brian and ask what in the heck is going on at Lakeland Community College. I'm seeing some of your posts about that. Can you clear things up, Brian? What's going on there?
Yes, we've been following Lakeland for quite some time. We go to their meetings. There has been a significant change in the leadership. There's been a change at the top level. There's a Dr. Ahuja has taken over for Morris Beveridge as the president of Lakeland, and many of the board members have been changed. Now, I'm rooting for Dr. Ahuja and the new board members to try to right the ship. We saw the analysis and the report by the state of Ohio, and it's not a pretty sight. There have been many changes, many cuts in staffing, but there's a basic problem that the citizens of Lake County are spending $20 million a year in property taxes for the school. A school in its heyday had over 10,000 students. They now have 4,400 students, and by 2027, they hope to have it up to 4,800. Back in, if I got the dates correct, back in 2011, there was a new building that was built across the street from the main campus. It's called the Holden Center, and the idea was they were going to offer a four-year college degree at Lakeland Community College. You could tie in with other colleges, but you wouldn't have to travel, for example, to Akron. You could actually get the same courses at the Holden Center. Well, back in 2014, I believe it was, in 2011, they decided they were going to lease the building, the brand new building, and they were leasing it for $914,000 a year for 2011 through 2014. And then they decided that they were going to buy the building, and they bought it for $13.5 million. Now they just made an announcement within the last month or so that they have, since the building was no longer needed, they decided to sell the building, and they sold it for $8 million. And when I look at that and I say, well, they paid $13.5, and now they're selling it for $8 million. Now I do not blame Dr. Ahuja or the current board members. They're in a very difficult position. But when I look at what's happening with the enrollment, there's got to be some out of the box thinking, and how do we reduce the educational cost for the Lake County taxpayers? And one thing that I've noticed is that we've got a vocational school called Auburn Career Center. And Auburn Career Center has been, so successful that they don't have enough room, and the children that want to have vocational training, they have to put their name in a hat, and they get, meritocracy doesn't mean anything at Auburn. They just pull their name out of the hat, and they get to take welding classes or firefighters or anything like that. And I was thinking to myself, well, rather than, and then I found out that Auburn's got over $20 million in cash. Auburn they've been in a 13-year lawsuit with their school union. Auburn has not, even though they've lost, I think, about 8 or 9 times in court, they have not settled with the union. So it's an ongoing problem with Auburn. So I thought to myself, well, why don't we solve the problem of, if we need more space, why doesn't Auburn Vocational, why don't they merge with Lakeland Community College? Why doesn't Lakeland Community College be more of a vocational training, or at least offer a significant increase in vocational training if that's what the community needs? The problem is, I'm just the average citizen out here, and how do we make that happen? How do we get those in the power positions that say, we've got to think a little out of the box, and we've got to start saving taxpayer money. We cannot continue to spend the money on Auburn and have them, keep building buildings when we've got a school like Lakeland that it's a ghost town. When you go there, there's not many things happening at Lakeland. So something has got to happen, and I do know that Jerry Serino is, as a senator, he's in charge of higher education. So I'm hoping that he will, in the next year, dig into it to try to make some significant changes so that we don't just keep spending money that's not bearing any fruit.
Yeah, what was it, just last year or the year before, Notre Dame College closed? I mean, it seems ridiculous to me at a certain level. And for me, not having worked on the financing and administrative side of colleges or K through 12 education, there's a clear, immediate question that comes into my mind, like how much could it possibly actually cost to put a student through 4-year college? When you think about the classroom, the textbooks, the computers, the software, etc., and drawing that sort of analogy to K through 12 education, we talk about that often on this show. I think there's an average cost per pupil of around $17,000 per year in K through 12. And then we have some schools like Willoughby East Lake that hit something like 43. I think Cleveland Metropolitan School District was like 45,000. Then you get into the college level, and you're talking about students going through at $50,000, $60,000 per year in some instances. And then you talk about these properties worth whatever it is, $8 or $13 million, but then they're going bankrupt and running out of money. How is it possible that simply instructing children and young adults is that gosh darn expensive? I mean, let's face it.
We also have problems in Lake County with I think it's the Lake Erie College. They've hit financial skids, and I was complaining to the commissioners about dumping more money into that college. And I think we gave them some ARPA money or something like that. But the whole thing, we're on the wrong path. We just need some leaders to take a look. Again, we've got to get the checks and balances in our system at the county level, especially Lake County, so that there are checks and balances that these taxing authorities, and Lakeland is one of the taxing authorities, cannot continue to use and abuse the taxpayers. Again, and I'm not faulting Dr. Ahuja or the current board. They're trying to do the best they can with under very difficult circumstances. But I did find, as I go to meetings at Lakeland under the old regime, this was a definitely DEI school, and they were left leaning. They had more administrators than they needed, and I think there's the current board. I think Matt Hedebrand, who is on that board, he's doing a good job of trying to address the DEI. So there's some hope, but I'm more worried about the average citizen just being used and abused on the property taxes. Maybe Commissioner
they
Pletcher has some insight.
I want to cut to Commissioner Plechnik in a minute, but it seems to me that many of these schools, and we see it continue to happen with K-12 in these school districts that are charging a fortune, and the cost per pupil is astronomically high, yet they can't afford basics like busing and stuff, or at least they tell us that. And the term that jumps into my head is money pit. And I'm sorry to say it, but there's a combination there of feeling like we're held hostage because we, of course, inherently care enough about children, and we care about the future of the United States, and that we continue to give and we continue to pass these levies. But I think a long time ago, we needed to be doing a better job of actually, I think maybe what we need is Doge for schools. I think we need to bring Doge into
I would agree with that. And the other problem that I found at Lakeland is many of the children will come from the 9 school districts in Lake County. They will have to take remedial classes in order before they can actually take college level courses at Lakeland. So we're paying in all 9 school districts, we're paying for those that education, and somehow they're not learning, and we have to pay for it again when they take remedial classes. So something's out of whack.
Something's way out of whack. I mean, so I've said it before, and I continue to say it. It feels to me, and by all appearances, it looks like what we're creating is last place, most expensive. And that is a terrible thing to do to future generations of young American children. That said, I want to cut over to Commissioner Plechnik and then Leonard for comments.
So, number one, I'm very proud of the trustees that I've appointed to Lakeland Community College, including Matt Hebebrand. I think they're doing an excellent job in righting the ship in some very difficult times. Putting that issue to the side and looking at the broader problem with the expense of both elementary and higher education, I think the biggest issue there is administration and bureaucracy. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you fire half the administrators and you pay the other half as much, you'll still have too many overpaid administrators. That is the number one problem in education in the United States. It's not the cost of teachers. It's not that our students are becoming less intelligent. The problem is the bureaucracy. We need to fire them, and the folks that stick around need to be paid a lot less. Having a principal every grade, having an assistant to an assistant to an assistant superintendent, these days have got to be over. It's remarkable. Second issue with respect to expense, nowhere near as big, but still big, is that every pharaoh wants a pyramid. Every pharaoh wants a sphinx. There's no glory in really, really tightening the curriculum. There's no glory in mentoring students. The glory is to put your name on a building. And look, it's not just school superintendents and school board members who are guilty of this. Commissioners are guilty of this. Mayors are guilty of this. Congress people are guilty of this. They want to overbuild. I mean, if you look at most of the financial problems that most major universities have today, it's number one, too much administration, and number two, every college president wants to build a new building that they secretly plan to name after themselves as soon as they're done. And we've just got to stop it, because not everyone needs to build a building. You know, we need one building, one person gets to build it, and then everybody else uses it. The problem is I won't be remembered unless if I build the, Jonathan Broadbent building. And so we build another complex, another building that we don't need, or we replace a building earlier than necessary so that the new president of the college feels self-important. The third issue that we have to be real about here, and this is specific to public schools, grade school, high school, etc., is that they've been turned into daycares, extremely expensive, highly regulated daycares. And the best way to transform them back to real schools is to give public school teachers the tools they used to have, which is to discipline students and to kick them out if they don't behave. And let me tell you, I don't care if you're a drug dealer who thinks that education is for sissies. If you know you're going to be stuck taking care of your kids with no free daycare, if they don't behave, you're going to make sure even if you don't know how to read, that they learn how to read. We need to give teachers the ability to spank, punish, physically discipline, shame, and expel students who are problematic. And you will see the grades skyrocket for the kids who are still there. I know that it's controversial to say, but if you do not give teachers the power to discipline, suspend, and expel, even if we make all the aforementioned reforms, children will not learn. Because if you have dangerous, unbalanced, undisciplined kids who cannot be restrained and the teachers are not allowed to restrain them, I don't care how hard the other kids work, they will not learn.
Thank you for that. Leonard?
Okay, I'm just going to make one comment. It's more of a question. My question is public education necessary? There's something to think about. Don't have to answer it now, but I want you to think about that question. Secondly, how do we define education? Education is nothing more but the transfer of knowledge. Now, when I start to look at the curriculums that are out there and what we're transferring as far as what we call knowledge, that is a guaranteed recipe for failure. And so when I look at public education, from its very onset, the way it was started, it was communistic to begin with, and it's communistic now, and nothing has changed, because what it depends on is someone else's property or someone else's money to make it work. And in my book, when I look at my Bible, taking money from someone else to give to someone else for someone else's education, as noble as it may seem, the Bible calls that stealing. Now, I'll be willing to help someone with their education. We do it now. We got tons of families that are homeschooling, private education, substitute teacher. We got all of that. But to take it from me and not allow me to use my money effectively to transfer and help educate kids, that to me is a whole nother discussion that we need to take place on. And that's it for me.
Thank you. That's excellent comments. So what we've covered here, if we're going to put sort of an umbrella over the entire series of topics and conversation we've had tonight, is that government corrupts and it ruins everything. It has been ruining education. It's seeking through all these non-governmental organizations to ruin all aspects of our representative government and all kinds of bad stuff. It's blocking potentially wonderful bills that should pass in Ohio, like House Bill 73. If any of this strikes a chord with you and you're interested, you want to learn more, you can find Brian Massey, Leonard, you can find Commissioner Plechnik, myself, Joe Miller. Please do tune in again, visit the store, pick up your swag. You can get your nifty mug and t-shirt as well. And remember to like this and follow. And by all means, please do think good thoughts about Joe Miller. We want him back healthy and feeling well again soon. For now, we're going to wrap up this episode. We did our very best to bring you some good, helpful, worthwhile information. My fellow Ohioans, thanks again for tuning in to Ohio Political News.
Thanks, Jonathan. Nice job.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Commissioner Plexner. Thanks, Leonard.
Oh, thank you, sir.